Problems with the New King James Bible, Part 2. It might be helpful, if you've not heard the first one, to go back and hear the first one of this, Problems with the New King James Bible, but this is Part 2. John the Apostle writes, "Beloved, believe not every spirit, but try the spirits whether they are of God, because many false prophets are gone out into the world." That's 1 John chapter 4 and verse 1. This time I'm planning to discuss 3 more words which are different in the NKJV from the AV 1611, while the underlying Greek text is the same. The next word then, the first word on this occasion, is fornication. In 1611 the word appeared in 4 forms in English: fornication, fornications, fornicator, and fornicators. Taking all 4 forms together, the word appears 39 times in the original, that is to say the 1611 KJV New Testament. Of these 39 occurrences in the KJV 1611, 21 of them are changed in the New King James Version from fornication to sexual immorality. 18 of the 39 references to fornication in the old KJV have been translated as fornication in the New King James Version, so that a little more than half of the references in the NKJV are changed from fornication to sexual immorality. Just in passing, the complete concordance of the NIV shows no reference to fornication at all, and I suspect that might be commonplace. You might like to check for yourself. You could do so maybe on Bible Gateway. That might be commonplace with many of the modern versions. The New King James Version lines up with many modern versions here, which are based, and they themselves are based on the corrupt Greek manuscripts. The reason why half of the references are changed from fornication to sexual immorality is not apparent to me from the contexts. Maybe the aim of making it a bridge Bible was a factor, and more on that subject of a bridge Bible in a little while. The expression sexual immorality may mean something very different indeed from the word fornication. Morality derives from the Latin word mores or mores. This word means the customs among a people at a given point in time, so that the custom may be wicked and far from biblical, and yet nevertheless be the morals of the day. Fornication is defined in Webster's Dictionary as, quote, illicit sexual intercourse on the part of an unmarried person, unquote. But this is so commonplace now in Britain, for example, as to not be considered immoral. That is, it is a custom. It is not out of place conduct, hardly at all. This being the case, fornication then in Britain today is not sexual immorality, and therefore the words sexual immorality do not apply to fornication in many modern minds, in particular perhaps the younger generation. The constant cry from Bible modernizers is that the scripture must speak in the language of the day, completely, however, overlooking the fact that an increasingly godless society will adapt the language to excuse its behaviour. All that is needed is to change the Bible to the new language norms, and godless behaviour is condoned now on divine authority, or at least so it would seem. The long-term effects of such a change in the scriptures, particularly with regard to fornication, is that parents who teach their children to abstain from sexual intercourse before marriage will themselves be accused now of promoting sexual immorality, because fornication is moral now, and to withstand it therefore makes the parents immoral. The NKJV was published in 1982. I checked this morning my copy of the ESV, published in 2002, to find that every single one of the 39 references has been changed to sexual immorality. I hope this gives pause for thought. The real reason they made the NKJV. On the Chick Tracts YouTube channel, there's a very brief clip called, quote, "The real reason they made the KJV," unquote, the NKJV, unquote. There's a very brief interview with a man called Kirk DeVitro, which is worth the brief time it takes to view. It's about 4 minutes long, and you'll learn there why I spoke of it earlier as a bridge Bible. The second altered word I want to talk about, altered from the KJV to the NKJV, is the word servant. In the Greek New Testament, there are 4 words which are translated as servant, and the most common of these is the word doulos. In the Greek text, doulos occurs 121 times. And remember, we're talking about the same text which the NKJV translators claim they use for the NKJV. So in the Greek text, doulos occurs 121 times, and of those it is translated 115 times as servant in the KJV 1611. I believe we should be very concerned that on 21 out of the 121 times servant appears, the New King James Version has changed the word to slave. That's nearly one change in every 6 verses, which reads servants in the 1611. In the entire Old and New Testaments in the AV 1611, the word slave appears just twice. It might be worthwhile, before pressing on with the NKJV change, to look at those 2 references in the King James Version of 1611. They are found in Jeremiah chapter 2 verse 14 and Revelation chapter 18 verse 13. So Jeremiah 2:14, first of all, reads, quote, "Is Israel a servant? Is he a home-born slave? Why is he spoiled?" Unquote. The context of this statement is the apostasy of Israel. Humanly speaking, God is marvelling at Israel's fallen state, and the word slave used here is not at all a condoning of their condition, but really is expressing, in a sense, their fall from the freedom that they might have enjoyed had they remained obedient. The single New Testament reference to slave in the KJV 1611, just one, is in Revelation chapter 18 verse 13, where we read, quote, "And cinnamon and odours and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men." And the word translated slaves here is not doulos. This is the only reference in the AV New Testament to slaves, and refers to the fall of Babylon during the Great Tribulation. At that time, evidently, men will once more be slaves. It is never in the King James Bible used of Christians. But we learn from Revelation 18:13 that slavery is coming back. Some of the most striking changes from servant to slave in the NKJV occur in Romans chapter 6. 8 times in the second half of this chapter, servants of righteousness becomes slaves of righteousness. In chapter 6 verse 16 we read, quote, "Do you not know that to whom you present yourselves as slaves to obey, you are that one's slaves whom you obey?" Close quotes. Verse 17, quote, "But God be thanked that though you were the slaves of sin, yet you obeyed from the heart that form of doctrine," etc. Verse 18, quote, "And having been set free from sin, you became slaves of righteousness," unquote. And so it continues in chapter 6 of Romans, twice in verse 19, also in verse 20 and in verse 22. Of course, I do not know what the translators were thinking of, particularly as in 5 out of 6 cases they leave the word servant as it is in the King James Version 1611. It seems a little strange to me that having told us we have become the slaves of righteousness, the epistle to the Romans, the epistle to the Philippians, the epistle to Titus, the epistle from James, the second epistle from Peter, and the epistle of Jude should all call themselves, in the first verse, servants. Had none of them read chapter 6 of Romans? Of the 21 times that servant is changed to slave in the NKJV, only 4 of them occur in the Gospels, while the remaining 17 occur in the epistles. I will not list them all, but I'll give you the Gospel occurrences. Matthew 20, verse 27, Mark 10, verse 44, John's Gospel, chapter 8, verses 34 and 35, and then 17 more times in the epistles. Gail Riplinger's book, which I think I mentioned in my first recording on this subject, New Age Bible Versions, exposes an undoubted connection between the New Age movement and the NKJV. It seems strongly probable that it is a New Age influence which has turned servant into slave in the NKJV. Finally, Webster's dictionary defines the 2 words as follows: slave, a person held in bondage, a thrall, one who has lost control of himself, freedom of action, a drudge. And the other definition in Webster, servant, one who exerts himself for the benefit of another master as a public servant, an official of a government. That Webster's Collegiate Dictionary, 5th edition, 1938, quoted in Riplinger. When critics complain, as we have often heard, that the Bible condones slavery, or that the Bible rather condones slavery, I answer that my Bible certainly does not. The third and final word for today's message is the word devil, which has been changed in the NKJV to demon. It is probable that there will be another message or 2 following this with more changed words in the NKJV. But turning to the word devil in the KJV 1611, or demon as it has become in the NKJV. Excuse me. Anyone with any familiarity with occult writers, and of course I hope you don't have too much familiarity, but many of us will have read those in our unsaved days. Anyone with any familiarity with occult writers will have heard of Manly P. Hall, of Bishop Pike, and perhaps Helena Petrovna Blavatsky. Helena Blavatsky, whom I mentioned in the first message, had this to say in her book The Secret Doctrine, quoted again by Gail Riplinger, quote, "The Church is wrong in calling them devils. The word given, however, as in the case of Socrates, and in the spirit of the meaning given to it for the whole of antiquity, stands for the guardian spirit or angel, not a devil of satanic descent as theology would have it. Demons is a very loose word to use, as it applies to minor gods. There are no devils, unquote. That's Luciferian Helena Blavatsky. From the outset then, make of this what you will. Here is a most notorious Luciferian. She was living in England in the 19th century. There is some possibility she had some contact with Westcott at least, but I won't press that point. A most notorious Luciferian telling us that the King James Version is wrong about devils, and in effect that the NKJV is right. Gerardus Bow is a convinced KJV 1611 defender. In his book, The Book of Bible Problems, at page 207, he writes, quote, "Devils are bad, even to the Greeks, but this is not so for demons. Socrates saw some demons as bad and others as good. The good demons taught men and made geniuses of them. This latter sense is found at the root of the English word demonstrate, where the demon is said to explain or literally to uncover the truth. To the Greeks, demons could also be human spirits. Thus we find the root demo in words such as democracy, demography, and democrats. In each case, demo refers to the human spirit, to people, unquote. That's Gerardus Bow. A book worth possessing, by the way, but very hard to get now, quite expensive on Amazon, and I think Gerardus Bow is now poorly and his ministry is closed down. But to continue, there are two Greek words in the New Testament which the King James translators of 1611 translate as devil and devils. The first is diabolos, from which we get our word diabolical, which is always singular with the definite article the, as applying to Satan himself. So you'd read the devil, the devil, the devil, and the word there is diabolos, except for one occasion in John's Gospel chapter 6 and verse 70, where the word diabolos is also used of Judas Iscariot. The Lord Jesus said, "One of you is a devil," referring to Judas Iscariot. The other Greek word is daimonion, which again in the KJV is always plural and translated devils, but in the NKJV is transliterated rather than translated as demons. The KJV translators were also men of great classical learning and would have known the ancient meaning of demons, and therefore translated daimonion as devils, that there might be no mistaking that they were evil spirits. A modern New Age reader reading the King James Version might conclude, the New King James Version, might conclude, how stupid those ancient Christians were, casting out helpful demons from the lives of men. When one begins to update language, matters begin to get very confused indeed. And as I said earlier, the updating is usually a progressive movement in favour of ungodliness. So far then in these two messages we have considered the words converted, hell being changed to Hades, world being changed to age, fornication becoming sexual immorality, servant becoming slave, and finally devil becoming demon. How's the NKJV looking now? The Lord willing, I expect there'll be at least one more message examining changes of words in the NKJV, but I want to conclude today with a quotation from Brooke Foss Westcott, one of the founders of the Revised Version and the New Greek text which created the departure from the KJV 1611. We're told so often by modern Bible users, that the differences from the King James Version 1611 are insignificant. Well, let's see what Westcott had to say. Quote, speaking of the Revised Version, He says this, quote, "But the value of the revision is most clearly seen when the student considers together a considerable group of its passages which bear upon some article of faith. The accumulation of small details then produces its full effect. Points on which it might have seemed pedantic to insist in a single passage become impressive by repetition. The close rendering of the original Greek in the Revised Version appears to suggest ideas of creation and life and providence which are of deepest interest at the present time," unquote. And I'll just add this comment to close. I wonder what these ideas which are of deep interest at the present time might be. Romanism? Evolution? The unbelieving work of 7 Church of England clergymen called Essays and Reviews had been published just 21 years before the RV and about 1 year after the publication of Darwin's Origin of Species. And I wouldn't be the least surprised if this was in the back of Westcott's mind when he said what he said. Both he and Hort denied the truth and the inspiration of the creation account. They flatly denied it in Genesis. Well, hopefully more next time. Hopefully we'll get to part 3, but for now, the Lord bless.